In this video, we're talking about two extremes of the hobby. One of the most joyful experiences, which is adding a new personal grail to your personal collection, which we'll get into here in this video. And then I also want to talk about some worrisome things that have me reflecting. You see, I'm trying to avoid words like anxiety and freak out, but some recent events about the hobby that are causing me to reflect. And so we're going to get into that as well. And then we're also going to tack at the end of this video. In the last video with the Tom Shrum collection I picked up, we forgot to add the part about the negotiations. I always like to include the price, how much I'm going to make and all of that, and it was just an oversight. So we're going to tack that on to the end of the video. And also we're going to talk about the one book that Mr. Shrum kept. I mentioned that in the interview. If you haven't seen the last video that I posted about picking up a $64,000 collection from a really awesome collector, you got to actually meet him, so I recommend that you go check that out. I'll put a link down in the description, so you go check that out first before you watch this video. But Mr. Shrum reached out to me after the whole thing and said, which book are you going to keep for your personal collection? So I want to show you that, but before we do, I want to mention we also have brand new giveaways for the month of August. If you subscribe to the channel, comment on this video, and like this video, you're entered to win a free slab. We're giving away a vintage Spidey book from the Wilbur collection and a modern Spidey book, Ultimate Spider-Man #1. And then also, if you head over to brycecomics.com and sign up for the newsletter, doing a separate giveaway over there with a vintage Wilbur collection Spidey slab and a modern Spidey slab. Follow me over on Instagram. I'm posting Giant Size X-Men #1 today on Instagram, so make sure you follow me over there at Bryce Comics and over on Whatnot. Link down below for $15 towards your first purchase on Whatnot. We have a show tonight, which will be in the past by the time you're watching this, but almost every Friday for the foreseeable future, we're doing slab shows, and they're going to be really exciting shows, tons of giveaways, because we've got to move some books, which we'll get into here in just a sec. Without further ado, the book that I decided to keep for my personal collection is Amazing Spider-Man #252 in a 9.8 from the Tom Shrum collection that he bought off the rack for 60 cents all the way back in 1984. And the reason that this book is special to me is it's one of the first slabs that I ever bought. One of them, not the first, but one of the first ones. I remember buying it for $375, you know, over a decade ago. And I've bought and sold many copies of this book over the years, you know, and it's one that I have thought have always thought is going to be in my personal collection someday, but I just got to find the right copy. And so for a long time, I was searching for a Canadian price variant because that's one of the rarest copies of this book. You hardly ever see it come up for sale. And this book is not rare by any stretch of the imagination. There are thousands of copies of this on the CGC census. In fact, let's pull it up. So as we can see here on the CGC census, there is 2,151 9.8s, 8 9.9s, no 10s, but a total of 24,000 graded copies on the census, which is not rare by any stretch of the imagination. There's tens of thousands of copies of this book still out there in the wild that have not been graded yet. And even with all of that, with that many copies, supply and demand says that this book is worth $1,200. And so since it's not a rare book, I've always wanted to keep this book in my PC, but I wanted a special copy. So for a long time, I thought it would be the Canadian price variant, which is much more expensive, or at the very least, a newsstand edition, which is more rare than the direct edition here. But now I found this copy, which I have a personal connection to this specific copy, which I cannot be said for any of the other tens of thousands of this book out there. And that's important to me because, you know, this was bought off the rack by Tom Shrum. And let's read the note. So I reached out to him and said, hey, would you mind, you know, writing a little note about the story behind this particular copy of this book so I can print it out and put it on the back of the book? He said, I would love to. You know, there's nothing better than, you know, knowing where your prize collectibles went and knowing the story. So he was happy to do it, and this is what he says. Tom bought this book brand new off the shelf at cover price during his freshman year at the University of Arkansas at Rock Bottom Used Books in Fayetteville, Arkansas in March of 1984. At that time, the books came out a few months prior to the publication date on the cover. This is why if you ever see a date stamp, which is a few months before the indicia date, that means that they stamped it the day it rolled into their shop I think it adds provenance. I had somebody return a date stamp book. I was like, really? Because a date stamp like that adds to it, but to each their own. It says here, Rock Bottom was a small used bookstore just a few blocks off of campus. They also sold comics. Back then, Tom would carefully read his comics one time, then he would press them raw, unbagged, carefully stacked under a few college textbooks in the closet of his college dorm room for a few weeks so they'd stack better until he could get them back home. Once he got them home from college in the summer of 1984, he bagged all of his new comics in Gerber Mylites and stored them in acid-free archival flip-top boxes, and there it sat in his mom's closet in Jacksonville, Arkansas for 30 years. Here's a picture on the screen of the actual box that Tom used to store these books. Tom was eventually reunified with his original comic collection after a full military career, and he submitted the ASM 252 in CGC 2014. He did not do the CCS pressing service because to his eye the book looked perfect dead mint. It came back a 9.6 with a single greater note of stacking bend. Upon closer examination, Tom could see a very subtle stacking bend, so a few years later he resubmitted it with a CCS press. It was the only book Tom ever resubmitted because it was so beautiful and looked like an easy 9.8. After the second submission, the book came back a 9.8. So bottom line, this gorgeous, well-wrapped, and vivid copy of ASM 252 has been read one time by the original owner, preserved meticulously, and submitted to CGC after 3 decades in storage. It has never been openly sold on the market. He's happy to see his original comic go to an owner who appreciates this piece of early Copper Age history. So, as you can see, now I have a special copy of this book. I wouldn't trade this book for a Canadian price variant. No way. This one has a personal connection, a personal story. It's my copy. And so I would encourage you guys to make connections when you can. I know a lot of people are very private, but it will enhance your collecting experience to make connections with people. Even if you buy a book off eBay, I saw in the Wilbur collection, one of the books came through, and somebody that Mr. Wilbur bought the book from on eBay wrote a note and put it on the back of the slab that said, "Hey, Jeff, I bought this book for cover price off the rack back in da-da-da-da-da." That makes the book so much more special, and I think it will enhance your collecting experience, and I highly encourage you to make connections wherever you can. So why was this such a big decision for me? Because I didn't make this decision lightly. This book is worth about $1,200, and so I spent $1,200 on this book. That's the way I look at it, because no, I didn't pay that much for it, but it's an easy sell, and so this is $1,200 out of my profit. See, I am in a weird situation as a dealer where my hobby and my livelihood, there's a blurred line right there. And if I'm not careful, I'll absolutely go out of business. It will go from, this being a career to this being me spending money. Just to illustrate the point, I want to pull up here the spreadsheet from the Shrum collection and just show you just very quickly the books that I absolutely would have loved to keep. 252, which I am keeping. 238 in a 9.8. This is like I think $1,500 book or something. Also bought off the rack. I would have loved to keep that. The first appearance of the Hobgoblin. ASM 300, it was a 9.6. I probably would have held out for a 9.8, especially with prices of 9.8s today for ASM 300. But then if we go down to Flying Saucers, the #1 on the registry set, I would have loved to keep that set of books. It's like, I think it's like $1,400 or something. Giant Size X-Men #1, that's a $5,000 book. Ultimate Spider-Man 1, signed by Stan Lee, the first edition of Ultimate Spider-Man 1, would have loved to keep that. Walking Dead #2, 3, 4, 9, 10, and 19. I would have loved to keep those. And boom, we could stop right there. We haven't even got to the X-Men, and I'm already in the red, because as we're going to talk about, I'm only going to make about 10 grand of this whole collection when it's all said and done, and that's over $10,000 worth of books right there. And we haven't even got to the X-Men. When you get to the X-Men, take your pick. There's probably $15,000 worth of books right there that many of us watching this would absolutely love to keep. So as you can see, it's a very slippery slope, and I need to be careful. And I just, crunched my numbers. We're here at August 1st. I always crunch the numbers at the first of the month to see where we're at for the month and where we're at for the year. And, we are negative $6,000 for the year. I haven't made any money yet this year, and it's August. Okay, so the reason for that is because I just purchased these massive collections, and we're sitting on a massive amount of inventory which haven't even listed on the website yet. So we're actually in a very good place financially, but I'm dipping into reserves to make all of this happen. And this is all riding on the coattails of a video that Gem Mint just posted. Okay, so shout out to Gem Mint. He just posted a video, was very transparent and honest about his current situation, and that video shook me to my core. Okay, and the reason why and why I think it's worth talking about here is, just to recap his video, I highly recommend that you go and watch it. I'll put a link down below. He shared that he had some revenue streams that put him in a very good position financially, and he made some decisions that, you know, in hindsight were not good financial decisions. He bought a house with a $5,000 mortgage, and then some of his revenue streams dried up, and he was no longer able to support, you know, the financial decisions that he made when the money was good. And so major shout out to Gem Mint for making that video. I think it is highly relatable to so many people. So many people are going to benefit from it. It's really affected me and caused me to reflect on my life, my career, and, you know, he may have made some poor financial decisions to get into the situation that he's in, but he's making the right decisions now to get out of it. And I think that that shows a tremendous amount of character. And the fact that he's willing to share that with thousands of people who can likely benefit from it as well, just shows massive character. So props to you, Gem, for doing that. But needless to say, it really affected me because he's a comic book and collectible, you know, pop culture related YouTuber that sells collectibles, and financial situation has changed. I'm a comic book YouTuber that sells collectibles, and I also just bought a house with a $5,000 mortgage where I run this business out of. There's a lot of similarities there. And, you know, yes, the money is good now, but what if it's not? You know, what if the revenue streams dry up? And I want to circle that back to this book. And one of the things that I've done in this hobby that I'm not going to do anymore, which is I've felt obligatory needs to hold on to books that had, you know, personal value. And it's a very complicated thing because this is an emotional hobby. But I don't think Gem should feel bad about having to sell his collectibles to, you know, make ends meet. I don't think I've seen so many other people comment over the years how they regret selling their collection because they, you know, needed money to go to college. It's important to put this in perspective. This is a hobby. These are collectibles. And, you know, if you had to sell your collectibles to go to college or buy a car or keep a roof over your head or pay the mortgage, I don't think you should regret that, you know, and so I'm not going to do that anymore. Yes, I absolutely love this book, and a lot of these books on the shelf behind me, I mean, most of them have personal attachment, personal stories behind them, but I'm no longer going to feel married to them. I'm not going to feel obligated. You know, hopefully they stay in my PC forever. I never have to sell them. But if I do, I don't want to regret it. I don't want to have to feel bad about it if I make the right choice to, you know, honor the things in life that are more important than a hobby. So I think it's important that we all reflect on that, keep it in perspective. And, you know, it's not to say like don't feel regret, you know, but just put it in perspective. And it's going to be very difficult to not feel regret because we love these things. They're so emotionally attached to us in life. You know, this is a hobby and there are more important things. So shout out to Gem Mint for making that video. I really appreciate it. I highly recommend you go watch it. Link down below if you haven't already. So I think it's important, you know, not to live in fear, not to be motivated by fear, but to be, you know, cautious about our purchases and this hobby and things, and keeping things in perspective. So that is one of the things that I love about this hobby is, yes, comics aren't as liquid as other assets like, you know, stocks where you can just click a button and sell all your stocks. But worst case scenario, if they're graded collectibles, you know, you can sell them to a dealer like me or many other dealers and get paid in a week. You know, that's the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, you sell them all yourself one by one, get full market value for them over time. That's the best case scenario. Of course, if you have a raw book collection or something that's a little bit less desirable, you're going to take a bigger hit. But, you know, there is an out. There is an out for these, you know, if you do get into a position where you have to sell. And also from, you know, why Gem's video is so relatable to all people is you don't have to be, you know, self-employed in collectibles to relate to that. I mean, any job really has the possibility of running out of funding. You know, like the revenue streams dry up for a certain position at a certain job and they let you go. I mean, it's just, there's really no job that is like super, super secure unless, you know, there's a couple where you have like absolute security. But for the most part, all of us, you know, are at risk of losing our jobs, and that's not a place to live out of fear, you know. And it is nice to know that this hobby, we can fall back on it if we are those like myself who are heavily invested in this thing. You know, it can bail us out if we have to. So a little bit of a perspective change for me because of that video. Now I want to talk about the two things cut in the clips here from Mr. Shrum. One thing that he mentioned in his video was that there was one slab that he kept out of all his slabs. He still has a bunch of raw books he needs to process, but he sold me all of his slabs except for one slab, and there's a cool reason why. So he writes here, the one book that he decided to keep, the one slab he kept, was Amazing Spider-Man number 248, and it appears on many lists of people's favorite Spider-Man stories, even some folks' favorite overall comic stories of all time. The book has two stories, and the second story is about the kid who collects Spider-Man. When I read that comic at age 19, I cried. I blubbered like a baby in my college dorm room. I encourage anyone to read that comic. Buy a reader copy, Omnibus, Marvel Unlimited, many ways to read it. I don't want to spoil the story, but it's timeless and particularly poignant to me now, with my wife being a breast cancer survivor. And yes, that comic is my original copy, purchased brand new, and it also is a 9.8 white. So that's the one book he decided to keep. Maybe I'll do a special video on that specific issue of Spider-Man down the road. And I also want to just tack on here at the end the negotiations for the Shrum collection, how much I think it's worth, how much I think I'll make. As it stands right now with the Wilbur collection and the Tom Shrum collection, I mean, I haven't made a penny yet, and that is a certain kind of feeling. You kind of feel it right here, you know. So we're gonna have a Whatnot show tonight. I appreciate all you guys for coming along with me on this wild, emotional ride. I wouldn't pick anything else to do for a job. This is amazing. I love all you guys. I appreciate all you for all the support. Let's hop into that clip, and we'll see you soon. So I'm at my kids' swim lesson, and you're not allowed to watch the swim lesson because it's distracting to the kids. So I thought this is a perfect opportunity to film this part of the video, which is about the pricing, because it's always a pet peeve of mine when I watch a collection haul video and they don't talk about what they paid and what it's worth, because it's like, what are you hiding? So Tom initially reached out to me, sent me the spreadsheet, and he wasn't really sure if he wanted to sell at that time. And from our conversations, I felt like he wasn't quite ready and I wasn't going to get the collection. But he sent me the spreadsheet, and I just did some general valuations and made him an offer based off a general valuation. And I shouldn't have done that. I've done it in the past. It's a mistake I've made in the past, and I made the same mistake again. I should always crunch every single number for every single collection, because at the end, if you don't do that, you question yourself and you wonder, like, did I overpay? And so, but I did it, and it's all gonna work out here. So his GPA valuation of the book says he had them all logged into GPA, and when you do that, it spits out a GPA valuation, which is kind of like another flawed FMV tool. It's just off. It's just a little bit off. GPA is wonderful. I use it every day. It's my preferred method for valuing books, but I just look at the last sale and the 90-day average, and then some personal interpretation of the book depending on, you know, what's going on in the market, to come up with a valuation. But GPA will automatically do that for you and spit something out, but it's a little bit off. Go Collect is actually much better than the GPA valuation at this point, since they fixed their algorithm. But anyways, his GPA evaluation was somewhere between 97,000 and 99,000, and I did a spot check. So I looked at like 10 or 15 books of, like, you know, a good representation of the collection, and found that the GPA evaluation was 10% over. So what I would actually list the books for was around $90,000, and this was like a month and a half ago, so that number may have come down a little bit. And then, you know, I offer the 10% off, and then some of the books, and this is exactly what I told him in an email when I made the offer, exactly verbatim, this stuff. This is what I would list them for. I offer the discount. Some of them I'm gonna have to offer a 15 to 20% discount to move, because they're just a little more difficult to move. Like the run filler books for Godzilla, for example, it's really hard to get, you know, full value for run filler 9.8 books. So that brings down what I would actually net sell them for to around $80,000. And then there's labor and fees, etc., which comes out to about $8,000, which brings down the net to about $78,000, and that's high, because you know that a lot of them are going to have to be discounted a little bit more than that, and maybe I'll price some more aggressively to begin with. So I think 78,000 is the absolute high end of what I will net after selling all these with all costs and everything. So we agreed upon $64,000, and I pay for shipping. Shipping came out to about $800, and you know, one of them is still missing in transit, so we'll see how that shakes out. I'm sure it'll be fine. It usually is. So I think like a safe number would be about $10,000 in profit, and it'll probably take me at least a month to move all these books, because some of those books in there were like huge outliers, and I'm not going to get anywhere near what the GP evaluation was. So I just got off the phone with Tom today after I sent him the money, and you know, he just reiterated like how extremely happy he was with the deal. All said and done, with me being straightforward and honest with saying exactly what I just said to him up front and stuff, that he just felt really comfortable with it, and he's super happy with the deal. I'm happy with the deal. I'll make some money. People are employed. I had to hire a new person to work remotely to help list these and kind of move some things around with the listing process, because we're just a little bit overwhelmed with the three of us. Usually under normal circumstances, it's fine with just me, Riley, and Marcus, but you know, with these new massive collections coming in, we had to bring on some extra help. And I hope to share with you guys who that is as a content creator. I was kind of fanboying a little bit, but nonetheless, we'll get back to that later. So I did have a moment there. I was laying in bed and I woke up and I just went, I think I might have offered him way too much money. Like I didn't look at the whole collection. I sent this offer for $64,000, and I thought like, oh man, what if I missed something? I should have spent more time with it. You know, I just didn't spend enough time with that. I made that same mistake again. And so that was the big mistake on my part, is just for my own peace of mind, I should crunch all the numbers. Then I know exactly what I'm getting, exactly what I can expect to make. So, you know, hopefully I don't do that again. But at the end of the day, everybody's happy, everybody's safe, people are employed, wheels are greased, collectors will get great deals on great books, and that's how the negotiations went down. So I also mentioned in my offer email, you know, that he does have the option to send all of these books to an auction house. But I also really do think that at the end of the day, when you factor in auction house fees, the unknown of the market, and you know, sometimes you take a little bit of a hit when you send things to auction, I think he would have walked away with about the same amount of money. And the big thing is that he takes all of the guesswork out of it. You get your money up front, you know exactly how much you're going to get, and you don't have to wait months and months and months for them to sell, and all of the headache and the back and forth and the tracking and the emails and the, you know, keeping everything straight to make sure that all of your books sold and what they sold for, and the ones that didn't sell, that got relisted. You know, it takes a big piece of the headache out of it. And so he decided that this was the best option for him. And I completely understand that. It's so much cleaner, you know, to just know what you're going to get and to get it right away. So that was also, you know, part of the conversation. So thanks for sticking with me to the end, you guys. Appreciate you. Follow us over on Whatnot, link down below. $15 towards your first purchase. 2 brand new giveaways for this month: vintage and modern Spidey. 1 if you subscribe, comment, and like to the YouTube channel here. 1 if you subscribe to the newsletter over at brycecomics.com. We have, needless to say, hundreds of highly desirable vintage key comics at great prices coming soon, and they'll all be released through that newsletter. So make sure you sign up and use code COLLECT10 for 10% off all in-stock items. That code is always active. This is where I would put my comic book tagline and say something catchy, but I don't have one, so we'll see you next time. Bye.